Well, as the US presidential campaign gathers pace, surveys show the Republican frontrunner in a potentially tight race with Democratic incumbent Joe Biden. With that in mind, governments around the world are preparing for a potential second Trump presidency. DW's Ines Pohl reports.
When it comes to foreign policy, one decision Trump may take is to cut ties with NATO. During his first 4 years in office, he threatened many times to do just that.
Would you leave us if we don't pay our bills? Now, they hated my answer. I said, yeah, I would have to consider it. You got to pay your bills.
The US is currently the largest contributor to the alliance, financially and militarily. Its absence would significantly weaken NATO's ability to respond to threats and could potentially lead to greater instability and insecurity for all NATO member states.
Welcome back.
US assistance to Ukraine could also be on the chopping block. Trump has declined to commit to continued military support and has said he will simply solve the conflict in 24 hours. As president, he might cut a deal to end the war with Russian President Vladimir Putin, allowing Moscow to maintain control over Crimea and other Russian-occupied areas of Ukraine. If Republicans in Congress stand behind Trump, prospects for Ukraine's stated goal to recover all its territory looks bleak.
General Assembly.
Another target for Trump's funding cuts could be the United Nations. Many experts agree that Donald Trump, a staunch isolationist, could attempt such a move. And he'd likely use the same argument as he did with NATO, that the US contributes more than its fair share compared to other countries. Meanwhile, Trump's approach to China, arguably America's biggest rival, will likely be a mix of aggression and admiration. He has threatened to implement new tariffs and trade restrictions on Beijing, which could disrupt global markets. But he has frequently praised Chinese President Xi Jinping for being a brilliant guy.
He's strong like granite. He's strong. I know him very well. President Xi of China. And he's standing there. He's a fierce person. He runs 1.4 billion people with an iron hand. He happens to be a very smart person.
On the domestic front, Donald Trump has not held back how he wants to govern. He said this after Fox News host asked him if he planned to abuse power or seek retribution if re-elected.
He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one. We're closing the border and we're drilling. After that, I'm not a dictator.
But some critics warn Trump's rhetoric and plans, like those to halt immigration, echo that of fascist leader Adolf Hitler.
I think the real number is 15, 16 million people into our country. When they do that, we got a lot of work to do. They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done.
Election day is still nearly a year away, but the expectation is that the result will be determined by a small margin. And that raises another concern. If Donald Trump loses, he and his die-hard supporters may not accept the loss. And what we experienced on January 6 in 2021 may have been the start of a new era of political dysfunction in the United States.
Let's look at this with Boris Foreman. He's Professor of Politics and Director of the Politics section at Bard College, Berlin. Welcome to DW. And we'll start with Mr. Trump's increasingly harsh rhetoric. Who is it aimed at? His base or the undecideds he'll need to beat Joe Biden?
Oh, very much his base. I mean, this is pretty extreme rhetoric. We just heard the comment that has been likened to the rhetoric of fascist leaders, which certainly it is. He's also talked about his political opponents as vermin. There's clearly a radicalization in his rhetorics. And you could say, well, this is just rhetorics. But I think it's important to point out that there are historical parallels for this. And I think what it's also showing is that it's a symptom that he really depends on being reelected, given all the court filings that exist against him. So this is a pretty extreme situation.
So why appeal to the people he's already got rather than the people that he needs, given that the predictions are that if it is Trump-Biden, that the margin will be so close?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, will this really get him the 270 votes that he needs to actually clinch the presidential election? I'm not so sure. But I guess I don't know how far-reaching this strategy is. I guess one of the assumptions is that Biden is not doing very well in the polls. Actually, he has the lowest popularity ratings of any president since 1945 at this point. So I'm assuming that he's just betting on mobilizing more people than Biden will. So it's more about Biden losing than him actually winning. And maybe this could also be a strategy to mobilize people for the case that he doesn't win and tries to, take other means in the election to become the president again.
Right. And on foreign policy, we've seen and heard in the report there that he seems to be all about American isolationism. Why?
Right. I don't think there's such a thing as a Trump doctrine. We haven't really seen that in his first administration. Mostly his foreign policy agenda was about securing his own position at home. So whatever will suit his own standing is what he will do. Nonetheless, I think we have seen a major shift in the last couple of years, also under Biden, to be perfectly honest, away from international institutions. That has been a tendency towards renationalization and also isolationism, also a trend away from free trade. And this is a bigger movement that I think is trying to appeal to those who are saying we've had enough of globalization, it has not helped us, and so we need to protect our own citizenry from outside economic forces.
And I suppose related to that, we talk about Ukraine. We've heard the former president's scepticism about supporting Kyiv and his promises to end the war with Russia quickly. Is that a vote winner in the US? Is the American public tired of US support for Ukraine?
I mean, there has been a fatigue of wars, more generally speaking, since the Iraq and Afghanistan war in the early 21st century. And I think this has carried on into the other campaigns. Biden was quite resolved in his support of the Ukraine, and so were also GOP leaders at the time, Mitch McConnell and others, who traveled to Ukraine. But I think there is a general fatigue. And I think it rhymes with the overall fatigue with globalization and American investments abroad. So I think we are seeing the US turning in on itself, not realizing, though, that making America great again, or making America great in the first place, was tied after the Second World War to its investments in global public goods like security and the financial order and so on. So there is a big reversal here that we're seeing.
Thank you for that, Professor Boris Forman from Bard College, Berlin.
Thank you.